Let's talk about lighting as a design element. For reference, these are a few ways in which I use lighting in my home to elevate some of these areas. The good thing about lighting is that there is such a huge range that there is almost something for everyone and every home. I also feel like there is so much choice at every price point that this is where you can really have fun with design. Before we start, for a quick background, hi, I'm Shreya. I run an interior design account called Taro's House with my partner Marco, and it's named after our Chihuahua Taro, who is sat right next to me. Today I'm in the living room on the sofa for a slight change of scenery. I'm very new to YouTube. This is just my third video in this series, but I hope you'll enjoy this. I wanted to talk about lighting because collecting lamps has been my most recent obsession. I think lighting can really transform a space in so many ways. I hope that today's video will inspire you to look at lighting with a slightly different lens and maybe invest more into what you think will really help you transform your space. I want to start off by talking about materials and textures because this is something that I've only learned after collecting many different lamps, and I think had I known in the beginning, I would have diversified my lamp portfolio even more, but I think it makes a huge difference. So what I'm referring to is actually the color and materials of the different lamps that I use in my home. I feel like in theory it might sound like a good idea to follow a very similar color or material pattern when it comes to picking different lamps for a space, but I have found that it's actually the opposite that works really well. So lamps are a really good way to add a bit of contrast to a space. For example, this corner, which is one of our coffee corners, it's one of my favorite corners in the home, and the reason I like it is because there are very soft materials like wood, there's a bit of linen, then you have something very strong like this concrete coffee machine, and next to it I've placed this chrome lamp from Gooby, and I think the lamp adds a very different feeling to the space. Had I replaced it with something that was made out of either paper or cloth like linen, I think it would have just all looked very homogeneous but not as interesting. I think the metal lamp adds a lot of intrigue to the space. On the other side of the room, like you can see behind me, I have a paper lamp, and on this side I have a ceramic lamp, and in front of me I have a glass orb looking thing, and then off to the side I have a metal lamp. And even though if I place all of these lamps together, you might think that they don't look good together, but when I've scattered them across different areas of the space, I think it all comes together really beautifully, and it doesn't feel like you have too many in one space because they're all so different and they add different textures to the space. Another thing that works really well with using different materials and textures is that light is something that is very organic, right? It's almost alive because the way it is diffused by paper, or it filters through linen, or the way it reacts when it's bouncing off of metal or wood is very different. And you can use this to your advantage because if there's a corner like this that requires maybe a brighter light to really illuminate this dark corner, then I'm using a paper lamp that diffuses the light beautifully, but here I'm using a light that actually points the light downwards so that it adds a little glow to that area. I don't really need this area to be that illuminated. I think it's very nice, it's very dim, and the ceramic really pushes the light downwards, so you can really see the difference in the glow on the wall here versus here. Using two very different lamps actually adds so much character to this wall. I can show you another example. Here are a few different lamps in the same space. This is actually a post that I posted on Instagram, but I tried to showcase how the same area can look very different with a different lamp because of the way it shapes and filters the light. So many people love this post, and I think the reason was because it really showcased how you can use a lamp to really change the feeling of an area without changing too many different elements. Something else that I think is very important but sometimes neglected is using height, and by height I mean actually placing lamps at different heights in the room, because obviously you have these standing floor lamps and you have table lamps and you can put them in different heights, but for example these two are actually quite similar, but they are slightly off. So one of them is slightly higher. I've used a pedestal for this one, and this one is on a drinks trolley. And then I will show you the one in my coffee corner. It's placed slightly higher than the one behind my sofa, which is placed slightly lower, and then again the one off to the side here is placed slightly higher. So when you look around the room, all the lamps are not on the same height or the same type of furniture, and I think that is a great way to just have lamps that are more closely placed together but just not on the same eye level, so they have enough variation to keep it interesting. I think another good example of this is in the studio, where I have this beautiful lantern, paper lantern hanging on the top, and then you have a table lamp slightly lower. Although they are so close to each other, I think they both diffuse the light so beautifully, so it doesn't feel like the place is like too lit up, and both of them have their own purpose and they look really beautiful together because the materials are very similar, but the way the light is filtered and shaped is very different. The next thing I want to talk about is light temperature and intensity. And I won't go over the basics like using a warmer light works better, because I think a lot of people talk about that. It's pretty common knowledge now. If you want your home to feel cozier, always go with warmer lighting. But again, that is a preference. I do think a lot of people prefer something that is maybe slightly less warm tone than this. Not completely like blue or white light, but just a tiny bit of warmth I think always helps. But there's something else that is not usually talked about, and that is intensity. And I think if you're someone who wants to photograph your home to look beautiful with the lamps on, you really have to think about this one. And I'm going to show you right now. I use smart bulbs to do this, but have a look at the light right behind me. So that's the Akari, and currently it's at 100% intensity, and I'm just going to reduce it. When you're photographing your home, you want the intensity to be as low as possible. When you are photographing a light source, the white balance can be really, messed around with. I'm not someone who knows all the technical bits about photography, but I have a very strong gut feeling when it comes to like what will look good and won't look good. And one thing I realize is always ruins photos is using very, very intense lighting in photographs, which throws off the white balance of the entire image. A lot of the lamps I've bought more recently actually have this inbuilt where you can control the intensity, but you need to get the right bulb for this to work. I don't usually buy like the RGB ones. I know that they're a bit more expensive. I just go for the one with one color. Next thing I want to talk about is how to use lighting as the main character of a space rather than an afterthought. Because yes, it's important to illuminate a room and lights can add a lot of personality, but I think if you just place a lamp in an area that is already, pretty much done, it can feel a little bit, like an afterthought, and it might stick out or not blend in as beautifully as you want it to. I actually nowadays, whenever I'm designing any particular space, I think about lighting first, because I don't use my overhead lighting and I need that area to be illuminated in some way. So for example, for this dining corner, when I first thought about it, I always wanted a source of light either here where it's currently or below, so that there would be something kind of a glow coming from like the lower half of the table. Same for this side. I started off with the trolley and the lamp, and then I built these other spaces. I can show you so many other areas in my home where you will really notice that the lamp is the main feature and everything else is sort of built around it. And if you're struggling with any space, just first place what you think will be the correct light source for that area, and then start working from there. And I promise you that at least, even if it's a standing lamp and a chair that you're starting off with, it's a good place to start, and you can add a lot more around it. But these are really essential framing objects that really give up like an empty space very good dimension. The next one is something that a lot of people talk about. I'm not sure if I entirely agree or disagree. They talk about like choosing the right size of a lamp for a space. I feel like if you're not like a big stickler for design rules, which I'm not, you can experiment a little bit and figure this out for yourself. I don't think there is anything called, right size for a right piece of furniture. I can show you this with my current bedside lamp. It's so big for that table. It's definitely far too big, but it works. I actually really love how it adds so much height to this corner of the room, because otherwise it's like a little bit boring. So this is completely personal, and I feel like if you have the eye for it and the skill for it, you can make any size lamp work. I also like lamps to add a little bit of whimsy to a space. Hanging it weirdly or in an odd area, or just odd looking lamps in general, I think add so much personality. So I'm not going to overthink this one, and I don't think you should either. The next 2 points sort of go hand in hand, so I'll share them together. First thing is choosing the right material to complement the material of your lamp. So for example, wood and paper go really well. I think ceramic and metal go really well. Wood and linen also go really well. I think the key here is to use contrasting materials, so metal and wood, instead of using like a wooden like base lamp on a wooden surface, then it wouldn't stand out. And I think this is pretty intuitive, but if you are struggling with this, just go for contrasting colors or even materials, because if you have something that is contrasting, it could also be complementary. I think it can add a little bit of good tension in a space that makes it more interesting. And to go along with that is using 2 sources of light next to each other. I think this is something that might be important if any of the lamps are just like a accent lamp and they don't really work as like a good source of light, and you still need another larger lamp next to it. So one of them is a diffused source of light and the other one is more directional, so it has a specific area that it illuminates and not an entire area, and that way they both won't compete with each other. Or you could have 2 directional lamps pointing at 2 different areas around the same space. So for example, I could have a light hanging here from the top to illuminate just this top bit, and then one at the bottom shelf there, and I think both of that would look really beautiful together. The last point I want to talk about might be something that a lot of people disagree with, but I think it's personal. I personally do not like architectural lighting. I don't know if this is the right term for it, I'm making this up, but light that is inbuilt into a space, and by that I mean, you know, sometimes people have like the crown molding and then they have light behind it, or they'll have like recesses in the wall and then there'll be light, or like on the wall it'll be built into it, maybe near the skirting. I don't know. I feel like this has the potential of making it look almost too curated, like a hotel lobby or just a retail space. I think for a home environment it's better to have more like scattered around lighting like this, loose lamps everywhere, instead of like building it into the architecture or foundation of your home. And the reason I say this is because when you have a lamp like this, you tend to figure out where it'll look good, and every now and then you can change them around. I can swap that around with a different lamp and I think it'll look really cute. I can just change it, and then the house grows organically with me. It changes with the seasons, and I think it just feels overall more organic. When I take pictures of it, you can really tell that someone, you know, like a human hand has placed that, and it'll move around with time. I think why I like more like this type of lighting, lamps, floor lamps, all kinds of like small lamps that are scattered around, is because you can really tell that over time people have figured out what is the best placement for them and how they personally use it, and then the lamp just happens to find its space in that home based on how the people in that home lived there. Anyways, I think those are all the points that I wanted to talk about. I can go on and on and on about lighting forever because I just love lamps so much. I also want to do a lamp tour, so let me know if that's something you would be interested in. I also want to share my book, Grounded. If you enjoyed listening to me or resonated with what I shared, then do consider supporting me by purchasing my book. It's shipped internationally everywhere in the world. It's just launched in July 2026. This is my first book, and this is a huge passion for me. It's been a labor of love for a very long time. If there are other topics that you'd like me to discuss, then let me know as well. I'm really enjoying creating these, and I hope that you found some inspiration in what I shared today. If you did, please subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.